Okay. Hello and welcome to my show, Justice Matters. As many of you know, my name is Patty Corrales and I was a former attorney for the Department of Homeland Security, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And I do a show once in a while and I welcome other attorneys in the field that are honest and good attorneys. And we speak about matters related to the immigrant community. And so today I want to welcome with me some colleagues and friends. I want to introduce everybody to Keli, Reynolds, and Carlos Juelle, who are here, and we're going to discuss certain criminal matters, but we're also going to discuss the state of the immigration climate. And so Keli, if you could introduce yourself to the community, please.
Sure. My name is Keli Reynolds, and if you'd like to reach me, you can find me at my downtown office. Reach me at the number 323-951-0144. Thanks for having me, Patty.
And Carlos, could you introduce yourself to the community?
Of course, Patty. Thank you for having me as well. My name is Carlos, and my office is in Downey, next door to Porto's Bakery, and my phone number is 562-622-9988. And again, thank you for having us here.
Well, thank you both for joining me today. And what we really want to discuss and make certain that the immigrant community is aware of is the current state of the climate for immigrants. We've all heard our president talk about how we have to be tough on immigration. What do you think immigrants in the community need to know? Keli, let me ask you.
Sure. Well, I think that we all know that things have changed to a more enforcement forward. The climate is more about enforcement under President Trump than it was under President Obama. So I think immigrants need to know that they have rights, of course. They don't have to answer questions. They don't have to let somebody into their house without a warrant. They have to know that they need to talk to an attorney. If they're here in any state in which they think their status may be in jeopardy or they're undocumented, they really need to go talk to a lawyer. There's no danger in talking to a lawyer. Of course, you want to make sure it's a reputable lawyer, but it certainly will not, it certainly can only help to know your legal options.
And I think that's important because most immigrants are afraid to talk to lawyers because they're afraid that by talking to a lawyer, that might open the floodgates of maybe that lawyer will say something to someone else, or if a lawyer asks the individual, let's take your fingerprints to get an idea of what your background is, they might be afraid that doing something like that might open the door to ICE or anybody else knowing about their immigration history. Carlos, what do you think about that? You're a Cuban immigrant, is that right? Yourself?
I am. Yes, I am.
So what can you tell the community about something like that?
One of the interesting things that happened is right after President Trump won the election and people started having doubts about their immigration situation and becoming afraid, a lot of people came to see me. And by consulting with me, I was able to find plenty of people that were eligible to adjust and just hadn't done it because there was no real need to. They didn't feel the need to do it. So just like it can cut both ways, just like it could be a bad thing in the sense that you might hear, no, we can't help you. There's also the opportunity that there's a way forward for you. But you're only going to find this out through consulting with a reputable attorney.
I think you touched on something that I want to just talk about a little bit more, and that is there's still so many people who could be eligible to remain in the United States lawfully, but haven't taken the steps to inquire about it. I mean, I've come across my practice, I'm sure Keli you have too, and Carlos you just mentioned this as well, where individuals come in and I'm astonished that you could have been a resident for 15 years. Sure. Why have you waited so long? And it's money, financial issues, of course, that hold people back, as well as fear. Because what if I start this process? Many of these individuals have gone to notaries. What in the immigrant community, people look at notaries with some sort of special status, and they've gone to them, and these notaries have done certain things that may not have helped them or benefited them at all, and now they're scared to talk to legitimate lawyers. It is a real problem, and I don't know how we can educate the public other than doing shows like this to let them know that there are attorneys like you, Keli, and Carlos, that it's important to talk to attorneys.
Patty, it's a big problem. I see a lot of people that come to me who could have fixed years ago that got bad advice from people that hold themselves out as notarios. Usually if they're doing income taxes, divorces, and immigration, that's not a good sign. And so a lot of people who could have fixed years ago have not done so because they've received bad advice from notarios. And sorry, go ahead, Kelly.
Oh no, I was and bad experiences they've had,
Yeah.
where immigration consultants, notarios, they'll accept money and then they just won't do anything, or if they do anything, it puts them in a really bad position and it just creates more fear, and it has created more fear. So, and that's one of, if there has been a silver lining of the new of the practices under the Trump administration or the policies, then hopefully people will come forward and say, well, living silently in fear is no longer an option.
It really isn't an option anymore. And I think, Kelly, we all know this. I mean, under the Trump administration, it's just been, excuse me the word for it, but hardcore enforcement.
Sure.
Mr. Trump, our president, has made it quite clear that he really has no love for immigrants. And he wants to do anything and everything in his power to prevent any benefits. Look, nothing has happened with DACA. And the real news about the DACA situation, which people don't want to talk about and which our president hasn't been honest about, is that the reason there hasn't been any moving forward with a DACA legislation is because he's holding family-based immigration over the heads of the Democrats. He wants the Democrats to agree to get rid of what he calls chain immigration, and they can't do that. I mean, that would get rid of a lot of potential individuals from being able to remain in the United States lawfully. And that's why DACA didn't really pass. So let's be honest about that. I mean, do you agree or not?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. They want to reduce. It used to be that the talk used to be only about reducing illegal immigration. And now we know that the Trump administration's goal is to reduce legal immigration. And unless we address that head on, Trump has made it clear that he's not going to address DACA. Now, we can't give in. We can't give in to a reduction in legal immigration. It's the backbone of our society. I don't know if you feel that way, Carlos, but...
Well, I thought at one point I heard that he was willing to pass DACA if they gave him the $22 billion for his wall. And if it was a clean swap, who cares? You can legalize 2 million people that we've already invested in, that our country has invested in, educated and basically brought into adulthood and are ready to contribute back to the society, in exchange for building a wall, which, while we don't agree with it, who cares? Give them the wall and let's legalize these 2 million people.
I agree with you, but that's not what he's doing. He's also dangling
I understand.
legal family-based immigration. Yeah. We can't get rid of it,
well,
like
no,
Keli said.
That's wrong. You shouldn't change the way that things have been done. And there's a way to move forward without having to go that far. But there certainly seems that they could do something for DACA. Now, there's been there was a great case that came down this week, which you're aware of, I'm sure, where a federal judge said that DACA needs to come back, and he gave the government 90 days to give him an argument why it shouldn't. But he's basically ruled that DACA needs to be restarted fully, where they can accept new cases. Currently, they're accepting renewals, even though we're past the dates, but this new case gives some hope to some people that may not have been able to file in time.
It certainly does give hope, but it shows the courage that judges have. And that is, the judges are not going to be bullied, neither by the president, neither by the attorney general, to do what the administration wants. They have to follow the law, and what is the law and what is just. And so I think that's important. I'm glad you told the viewers about this new decision. Like you said, and Keli, maybe you can expand on this a little bit more. There's a 90-day stay from on the judge's order. What does that mean?
Well, that means the order will not go into place or into effect for 90 days. So this order was more expansive than the prior order, which said that the government had to accept renewal applications for DACA. Now this one says, no, they have to accept new applications. So people who weren't old enough hopefully will be able to start to apply for DACA previously, hopefully will be able to start applying. But the 90 days, of course, is, as the judge said, the government didn't even produce an argument any argument as to why DACA was being repealed. And so the judge said, okay, you have 90 days to justify the repeal of DACA. And I think we all know that it can't be justified. So hopefully in 90 days, we'll have an opening for the acceptance of new DACA applications.
And that would, like Carlos said, give hope to so many in the community. But if someone goes to, let's say, another lawyer and says, oh, we can start doing initial DACAs, you need to be wary of that. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes.
Or go to a notary who said, yes, pay me this amount of money and we'll file a new DACA. So currently, no new DACA applications. You can just renew DACA. And I'm glad we got that message out to the immigrant community. Let's talk about something else. Keli, you talked about enforcement. I think, and knowing your rights, I think that's so important to let people know. You have the right to say, I will not answer any questions from an immigration customs enforcement. As a former ICE attorney, I used to train these agents on how to ask questions. And now I look at the situation, and when I see just, if you will, a violation of certain people's due process rights, when people have, what does it mean when an ICE agent approaches you? What recommendations do you have other than, telling them, I don't want to talk to you? What other things do you think that the immigrant community should know?
Well, I think one of the most difficult things about enforcing your rights is that it's a hassle. It's going to take longer. It seems so much easier to answer the questions than to say no, because that obviously can result in a longer in being detained for a longer period of time. But you can't be detained by an immigration officer unless there is a reasonable, I believe that the standard is a reasonable suspicion that you are undocumented or in the country illegally. So you do not have any obligation to answer questions. If an immigration and customs enforcement officer comes to your house, you do not have to let them in unless they have a judicial warrant. Immigration and customs enforcement officers will often arrive looking for one person and then start asking everybody about their legal status. Again, don't answer their questions. Don't answer their questions until you have consulted with a lawyer.
No, I think that's important. But Carlos, so many of these officers, they don't necessarily come knocking at their door. They wait for them lurking 2 blocks away. In those situations, is it enough reasonable suspicion for an officer to stop you just because you look Latino or you look Hispanic or you look like you may not speak English?
Obviously not. They can't stop you just because you're Latino or looking or, the color of your skin or anything like that. But what we've found in my meetings with ICE, Keli, I know that you're also there. They're going after targeted people. They're looking for specific people that have outstanding deportation orders or who have been deported in the past and come back in. The problem is maybe a year ago, they would go in looking for that person and it was surgical. They would get that person and they would leave, take that person only. Now they're asking everyone who's in the home, do you have papers? And if they encounter other people who perhaps don't have documents, they'll take them as well. So it really, as Keli said, is important that you do fight for your rights, because the minute you open that door, it's not just the one person that they're looking for, but everyone else who doesn't have papers who's in jeopardy. And depending on the situation, if there's a prior deportation order or a pending deportation order, before they know it, they're gone. They're gone from this country. They're gone from their life as they know it. And it can be a long process. So it's important to fight for their rights right here and right now.
And I think that's true. And I want to just share with you one of the tricks that I used to recommend to officers, and that they still employ today, and that is they may knock on your door and they might say, and they're not going to necessarily be dressed with jackets that say ICE. They may just look like regular people, if you will, and they might say, "Oh, is that your car? It just got crashed," and you walk out of your door because you want to make sure that's not your car, and now you're outside your home and they can arrest you. So that is one of the tricks that you know, we would often, you know, teach our agents that that was a viable and legally permissible way of getting someone out of their home. Now, in talking about that, I just want to touch on this one subject, and I think you might all agree, and I'd love you to get your take on that, is they should at least have a valid driver's license. There should be no reason not to get a driver's license under AB 60 or have a valid identification. Would you agree?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's important. So what other important things do you think the immigrant community should know?
Well, Patty, I want to go back to your recommendation for a
course.
driver's license. I believe it was yesterday that USCIS announced that they are going to require that a recipient of a permanent resident card or an employment authorization document show ID and sign for it under a certain program with the U.S. Postal Service. So that goes back to the driver's license. Oftentimes, a person who's receiving an employment authorization document has no other identification. So if you don't, that's their first form of identification. So if you can, and of course I know that there's a paradox here, because if you don't have identification, you may not be able to meet the restrictions of AB 60 and get a driver's license. But if you can, get a driver's license right away, because the minute you receive an employment authorization document or a permanent resident card, you're probably not going to be able to sign for it if you don't have some form of identification.
Would a consular identification count for that? I did hear about that yesterday.
I actually don't know yet, because it has just been announced. Hopefully it would.
So so they're not going to be sending the employment authorization cards through the mail anymore?
Well,
Go ahead. Yeah.
my understanding is that they are
Yeah.
going to be sending them through the mail, but instead of the old way where they would just put it in the mail and good luck, there it goes, and anybody can receive it, and they would just put it in the mailbox. They now are going to require identification and a signature from the recipient.
In a way that makes sense, because often that's exactly what would happen. They would just mail it, and good luck, maybe someone picked it up or you never got it. So it does make sense, but now it's an added requirement that our immigrant community needs to get, you know, driver's license or valid identification documents.
And one of the things that would concern me is usually the mail comes during work hours. And so most of our clients are out trying to earn a living, and they can't receive it. They can't be there to sign. And so I think that we as attorneys may have to start receiving a lot more of these documents than we've ever had to in the past. So it's something that's going to affect, I think, the manner in which we do our business, and we may have to start
Well, what's
receiving those for our
disconcerting to
clients.
me is, you know, and I certainly don't want to be paranoid about things, but USCIS has become not as immigrant friendly lately because of President Trump's enforcement priorities. They have actually changed their mission statement, and they're becoming more enforcement oriented as well. So I hope this is not a ploy to deter people from applying for a work authorization or a way to find out about other people's status in the United States. So that's something we have to wait and see. I also want to, though, there is still hope for a lot of the immigrant community. Keli, you practice criminal law. What can you tell individuals who are in the immigrant community who have criminal issues?
Well, they're lucky they're in California. Because if they already have a conviction on their record, they should really see a post-conviction attorney, and see if that criminal conviction does have any immigration consequences. Of course, there are a lot of criminal convictions that just don't have any immigration consequences because they're minor, or they categorically don't fit within any of the definitions under the Immigration and Nationality Act. But if they do, there are many options for immigrants who are facing who have immigration consequences of their criminal conviction. California has passed numerous laws to help immigrant defendants. Some of them allow for vacating or eliminating the entire conviction. Some of them just allow for a reduction of sentence, a reduction in the characterization of the offense from a felony to a misdemeanor. And oftentimes there's not a whole lot that needs to be done to a conviction to eliminate the immigration consequences. So there are a lot of creative measures that post-conviction attorneys can take. I know you know that as well. And they really should get, obviously there are some deadlines they need to meet, some due diligence requirements in terms of acting in within a reasonable period of time. So they really should go see a post-conviction attorney now, or an immigration attorney who can refer them to a post-conviction attorney.
And Keli, let's just explain to you, because most people may not know the term of art, post-conviction. That is
Sure.
action that's taken after someone has been convicted and sentenced in regards to a crime.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So you mentioned within a reasonable time. Is there a particular limit, time limit?
No, I mean, on some of them, I know that Prop 47, which was the mandatory reduction from a felony to a misdemeanor, used to have a deadline, and that's a moving target at this point. And unfortunately, I can't recall the deadline at this point because it's such a moving target. But when I said due diligence or a reasonable period of time, that's a standard under the law that generally applies to any action taken after a conviction, which is once the disability of a conviction is discovered, once the problem is discovered, then the defendant has to act within a reasonable period of time. What that is something that's going to be determined by the court to go back and take the action in criminal court to make the modification that needs to be made, or just go back and get rid of the disability, argue about the error that they suffered, argue that the conviction is legally invalid.
And I think, and Keli, and I'm glad you told us about that, because it's important for much of our immigrant community, because we're all humans and we've made mistakes, and some of our clients have made mistakes, and unfortunately they did not have the ability to speak with an immigration lawyer before they entered their pleas to understand the immigration consequences resulting. When a client comes to you, Carlos, and may tell you that they have a outstanding criminal issue, what do you think it's important for that client to know?
Well, I think it's important to consult with an immigration attorney to understand the consequences of what they're going to plead to. If they plead to something that can affect them from an immigration point of view, they're not advancing their cause. And so when I talk to someone, one of the big things is these cases are lasting a lot longer, maybe 4, 5, 6 years in immigration court. And so somebody that comes in on day one may have criminal issues that don't impact their immigration so much, but by the time the case is actually ready to be heard, their criminal issues may become a problem. And then that's where someone like you or Keli becomes valuable, because they can bring that criminal issue in line with what's required for the court and maybe create a situation where they're not even deportable anymore.
And it's important for anybody in the immigrant community who is either facing a criminal charge to consult with both a criminal attorney and an immigration attorney, or someone who does both that area of law. So I'm glad you made that clear to everybody. That's important to know. And it's just something that we have to be made aware of. I mean, we have to make our clients aware of.
I would say for a criminal attorney to not consult with an immigration attorney when somebody is a resident or is undocumented would rise to the level of legal malpractice, because almost anything that they do these days can have an effect on their immigration status. So if they or people watching this or a family member have any kind of criminal issues and their immigration, they're not citizens, they should encourage that person to consult with an immigration attorney as well as with a criminal attorney when they're trying to resolve their criminal issues in court.
You said an important word, citizens.
Right.
Now, let me talk our last topic that I want to touch on. I don't think, and this is just my opinion, and I would love to hear from both of you, I don't think it's enough to be a lawful permanent resident this day. If you have an opportunity to become a citizen of this great country, you really need to consult an experienced immigration lawyer to determine whether citizenship is something that you're eligible for. I see this administration as being very enforcement oriented, and they're going after everybody. That's my opinion. So I encourage individuals who have been longtime residents. This is not a time where you can just remain lazy, if you will. You need to become a citizen of the United States. That gives you the opportunity to vote. And when you vote, you have power. And if you vote, we may have not been able, we could have avoided the situation that we are in now.
Yes.
But I think more importantly, Patty, when you become a citizen, you avoid potential problems down the road. Because I've had clients who, for example, have been riding in a car. The person they're with had drugs. They were not aware of it. Now suddenly they're an accomplice to drug trafficking, and that could impact their residency. If they were citizens, they might be able to, there wouldn't be as much jeopardy involved. And so by becoming citizens, they take away that worry that they could be at some point deported and separated from their families, from everything they've known or that they've known for years.
I think it's absolutely important. Kelly, what do you think?
Absolutely. And the other important benefit to being a citizen, and it's a benefit that is there for some permanent residents, but the other important benefit to being a citizen is that you get to immigrate your family members, thus far. But and that's important because then your family member, you can bring your family members out of jeopardy, and then they can become citizens. So even I think that's very important because when we started this conversation, we started talking about the fear of living undocumented. And of course, as Carlos just pointed out, it's not just, and as you started this line of questioning, it's not just undocumented persons who are living in fear. It's people, I've had clients come in and say, can I travel? And they're lawful permanent residents. But of course, 1 week after President Trump became president, he started blocking people from entering the country. And I have people from countries that are nowhere near the banned list, but they're so afraid. And if they became citizens, they would just get rid of that fear altogether, of course.
Yeah, that's very important. That's a very good point. Well, we could talk all day on immigration and criminal matters, but unfortunately our time is limited. But I wanted to thank you both for joining me today and giving some advice to our immigrant community. I think it's so important for them to be educated on this topic, and you two are two of the best lawyers that I know. So I, again, appreciate you being here and joining me today on Justice Matters.